Pretty much every government in history has made the same exact promise. Our money is safe. Our system is built to last. But if you look back, every single time, history proves them wrong. So that begs the question, what actually endures when all those promises of money just fall apart? Let's dig into the patterns history shows us. And this quote, this really gets to the heart of it. We tend to think of a financial collapse as some kind of shocking, once-in-a-lifetime event. But if you look at history, it's not the exception. It's the rule, especially for systems built on something as fragile as trust. From ancient Rome all the way to today, the pattern is just shockingly consistent. So that brings us to the real question, doesn't it? It's not if a system is going to fail, but when. And when it does, what actually holds its value? What's the difference between the people who get wiped out and the ones who make it through? Well, history gives us some pretty clear answers, and that's exactly what we're going to explore. Okay, so first we have to talk about this idea, this illusion of permanence. It's something we all kind of do, right? You look at the dollar bill in your wallet or the numbers in your digital bank account, and you see something solid, something real. But history shows us again and again that this blind faith in our money can be a really, really expensive mistake to make.
And here's the thing you've got to understand about money. It's not really a physical thing. It's a shared belief. It's basically a giant social agreement. And when events happen that make people stop believing in that agreement, poof, the value can just vanish, and with shocking speed. When you look back, the people who survived these collapses were almost always the first ones to start questioning the whole system.
All right, let's dive into the first and, honestly, the most common pattern of collapse we see throughout history. It's a story as old as money itself. It's that powerful, almost irresistible temptation for governments, especially when they're drowning in debt from wars or just wild overspending, to secretly mess with their own money. It's called debasement. And this right here just shows you exactly what I'm talking about. Look at Rome. They took their silver coin, the denarius, and they started secretly mixing it with cheaper metals like tin until it was basically worthless. Then, centuries later, the Byzantines did the exact same thing to their gold solidus, which was like the most trusted coin in the entire world at the time. They just slowly chipped away at its purity and destroyed its reputation. And the playbook is always the same. It's so predictable. A government needs cash, so they start making their money cheaper to produce, shaving a little purity here, mixing in cheap metals there. And at first, hey, it works. No one really notices. But then, people start to catch on. Trust starts to crack. And once the currency's credibility is gone, it's game over. People rush to dump it and get their hands on real assets. Things the government can't just counterfeit, like gold or land. And hey, don't think for a second this is just some dusty old history lesson. The same exact pattern played out with the paper money and revolutionary France. And it happened again, right here in America, during the Civil War, with the currencies of both the North and the South. Okay, this table right here, this is where it gets brutally real. This is what hyperinflation actually looks like. In just 4 years, the Confederate government basically printed its grayback currency into oblivion. A loaf of bread that cost 5 cents in 1861 was over $10 by 1865. Think about that. A soldier's entire monthly pay couldn't even buy his family food for a single day. Lifelong savings were just gone. Okay, so that's pattern one. Now let's talk about the second pattern. See, collapse doesn't always come from the inside. Sometimes a massive external shock, like a war or, say, a pandemic, hits the system. And it acts like a giant accelerator, rapidly, and I mean rapidly shifting wealth from one group of people to another. And the parallels here are kind of spooky, actually. After the Black Death in the 14th century, the people who had liquidity, actual savings in silver or goods they could sell, they were able to scoop up land and other assets for pennies on the dollar. Now, fast forward to the COVID pandemic. A very similar thing happened. As governments pumped trillions into the economy, those who had cash on the sidelines were able to buy up stocks and real estate when prices initially dipped. And it all boils down to this one simple, brutal truth. It doesn't matter if it's a 14th century plague or a 21st century pandemic. The result is always the same, a massive transfer of wealth. It moves away from the unprepared and straight into the hands of those who had reserves of real value ready to go when everyone else was forced to sell. All right, on to our third pattern. And this one hits close to home, because it's all about our trust in big institutions. We have this belief that certain banks or financial companies are just So huge, so important that they're too big to fail. But history shows us over and over again that they're not.
Just look at this timeline. This isn't a once-in-a-century thing. It's a regular feature of our financial world. From the biggest banks in Florence in the 1300s to Lehman Brothers in 2008, and even more recently with what we saw with banks in Lebanon and even right here in the US. This idea of too big to fail has been proven to be a myth time and time again.
Now, this next point is absolutely crucial. We need to completely rethink what a bank account is. We tend to think of it like our own personal safe, right? But it's not. Legally, it's an unsecured loan you've given to the bank. It's their IOU to you. And in a real crisis, like the people of Lebanon found out the hard way, the bank can simply decide not to pay you back. And your money, it's just gone. Okay, so we've seen all the ways things can go wrong. Currency debasement, external shocks, big institutions failing. So now for the big question. What actually lasts? What survives all this chaos? Well, history points to a few very clear, timeless principles about what real value actually is.
First up, we've got pillar number 1, real tangible assets. We're talking about physical things that have their own inherent value. They survive precisely because they are immune to all the games we just talked about, right? You can't print more farmland to pay off a debt. You can't devalue a hammer by mixing it with tin. Their value comes from what they are and what they do, not from some promise a government makes.
And pillar number 2 is just as important, maybe even more so, because wealth isn't just about what you own, it's also about what you can do. When that shared trust in money just evaporates, the ability to produce something of real value, that becomes the new currency. People will always need to eat. They'll always need things built and repaired. Skills that meet those basic human needs, that is a form of wealth that no one can inflate away or take from you. Which brings us to this really strange, kind of uncomfortable paradox. For the vast majority of people who put their faith in these fragile promises, a financial collapse is an absolute tragedy. I mean, it's ruin. But for that small group of people who understand these historical patterns, it represents something else entirely. It represents a profound, once-in-a-generation transfer of wealth. Because at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. Wealth doesn't just vanish into thin air during a crisis. It moves. It transfers. It moves from paper promises to tangible assets. It shifts from the people holding IOUs to the people holding real things. It flows from the many who trusted the system to the few who prepared for it to fail. So history really leaves us with a question for you, for me, for all of us. When the system is eventually tested, and it always is, what are you going to be holding? A promise written on a piece of paper, or something real, something tangible, something with undeniable value? The answer to that question might just be the most important one you ever come up with.